The sea air in my small coastal town was a constant, a salt-brined balm I used to clean the city from my lungs every Friday evening. I lived a life of quiet, deliberate safety. My world was a manageable loop. The tidy bookstore where I worked, my cottage with its wind-chimed porch, the coastal path I walked each morning, the sound of the waves a steady heartbeat beneath it all. My friends were few but steadfast, our conversations held over steaming mugs in cozy cafes, a soundtrack of gentle indie music and the hiss of the espresso machine. It was a good life. It was a placid life. I had curated it for peace, building walls against the kind of drama that had characterized my younger years. I mistook the calm for contentment, the safety for happiness. I didn't know I was waiting for a tremor to prove the stability of my foundations, or for a storm to reveal their cracks. He came into the bookstore on a Tuesday, a day already softened by a persistent, misting rain. The bell above the door chimed, and he entered with a gust of damp, city-scented air. He was older, not in a way that suggested decline, but in a way that implied substance, like a well-worn leather journal. His smile was kind. His eyes held a gentle curiosity as he browsed the fiction section, his fingers tracing spines with a reverence I found instantly endearing. He asked for a recommendation, his voice a low, calm timbre. We talked about Salinger and Murakami for 20 minutes, the rain painting slow, lazy tracks down the window pane. His name was Arthur. He was in town for a few weeks, he said, scouting locations for a quiet writing retreat. He seemed different from the usual weekend tourists. He listened more than he spoke, and his presence didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like a natural addition. When he left, the air in the shop felt thinner, quieter. We ran into each other the next day at the pier, and the day after that at the little cafe beside my bookstore. It felt like fate, a series of happy accidents orchestrated by the universe itself. Our conversations deepened, moving from books to art, to our childhoods, to the quiet fears we both carried. He was witty and profoundly gentle, his kindness seeming to emanate from a deep, unshakable core. He brought me a single perfect peony on our third accidental meeting. He remembered how I took my coffee. He listened, truly listened, in a way that made me feel like the most fascinating person he had ever met. After a week of these encounters, he asked me to dinner. I said yes, without a single heartbeat of hesitation. The restaurant was a tiny place with checkered tablecloths and candlelight that danced in his eyes. He told me I had a quiet magic about me, that my coastal life was a poem he wanted to read over and over. I felt seen. I felt chosen. I felt for the first time in a long time thrillingly unsafe in the best possible way. The reveal came 2 weeks later, on a night tangled in sheets and the intimate dark of my cottage. The moon was a sharp sliver through the window. Our limbs were entwined, our breathing just returning to normal. He was tracing the line of my spine, and his voice, thick with a post-coital blend of affection and guilt, murmured it into the skin of my shoulder. My wife. She doesn't understand me like you do. The words didn't land as words at first. They were just sounds, dissonant and ugly, crashing against the beautiful silence we had built. Then they assembled themselves into meaning. Wife, children, a house in the suburbs with a well-tended lawn and a family sedan. The entire foundation of our connection splintered and fell away into a dark, cold void. I froze. The gentle hand on my back felt like a brand. I asked the necessary, horrible questions in a voice that didn't sound like my own, and he answered them all with a pained honesty that was its own particular cruelty. He wasn't a monster, you see. He was just a sad, trapped man who loved his children and felt unseen by his wife and found solace in my eyes. He made it sound like a tragedy, not a betrayal, and I, foolishly, tragically believed him. What followed was a secret life conducted in whispers and stolen hours. Our relationship became a creature of the night, existing only in the private world of my cottage. He would arrive after dark, often smelling of his other life. Laundry detergent I didn't buy, a faint trace of a child's strawberry shampoo. We created a pocket universe of intense, claustrophobic intimacy. We cooked meals together, our movements a silent, practiced dance in my small kitchen. We made love with a desperate, hungry energy, as if we could consume each other and leave no evidence behind. He was warm. He was present in those moments. And he loved me. I know he did, in the broken way he was capable of. But the guilt was a third presence in the room, a cold mist that settled over everything. I could taste it in our kisses, a metallic tang of wrongness. The warmth of his embrace was always followed by the chill of his departure, by the sight of him pulling on a jacket that held the scent of a home that was not mine. My world, once defined by the open horizon of the sea, began to shrink to the four walls of my waiting room. The emotional decline was slow and insidious. My life became a calendar of his availabilities. I declined invitations from friends, fabricating excuses that grew thinner and more pathetic. My walks along the beach stopped. The vastness of the ocean felt like a taunt compared to the confines of my new existence. I was constantly waiting, my phone a live wire in my hand, my happiness a tenant in a house he owned the key to. I was isolated, my world reduced to the sound of his car pulling up outside and the crushing silence when he left. I was a satellite, and his gravity was the only thing that held me in orbit. I started to see myself through his wife's hypothetical eyes, a secret, a shame, a monster, hiding in the shadows of their marriage. We had loved like monsters that first night, all teeth and hunger, and no thought for the world outside. But the monster in the story always has to hide from the light. The catalyst came from Sarah, my most steadfast friend, over a coffee I had almost cancelled. She looked at me across the table, her gaze sharp and unbearably kind. "You've disappeared," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're a ghost of yourself. Whatever this is, it's costing you you." She didn't press for details. She just held up a mirror made of simple, clear words, and I was forced to look at the reflection. I saw a woman hunched over her phone, her shoulders tense with waiting. I saw a woman who had traded her cozy, sunlit life for a few hours of borrowed warmth in the dark. I saw a woman with no self-respect, her boundaries dissolved into the sea of someone else's convenience. The love I felt for him was real, but it was a sickly, parasitic thing, feeding on my light and giving only shadows in return. That night, after he left, I stood in the middle of my quiet cottage and I finally understood. I had to choose. I could choose the pain of ending it, or the slow, soul-crushing pain of letting it continue. I ended it on a Wednesday. There was no dramatic confrontation, no thrown accusations. He came over, expecting the usual sanctuary. I had made tea. My hands were steady. I looked at him, at this kind, weak man I loved, and I said the words I had practiced. "I can't do this anymore. This isn't love. It's a hiding place, and I want to live in the sun again." He looked stricken, then sad, then resigned. He cried quiet tears that I knew were genuine. He didn't fight me. He just nodded, kissed my forehead with a tenderness that broke my heart all over again, and walked out of my cottage, out of my shrunken world. The silence he left behind was different this time. It wasn't empty. It was full of potential. The healing was not a linear path. It was a daily, deliberate practice. I called Sarah the next morning and told her everything. I let her hold me while I cried messy, ugly tears of grief and shame and relief. I reconnected with other friends, forcing myself to say yes to every invitation, even when I wanted to curl up in bed. I went back to my morning walks, the cold sea air scouring me clean. I signed up for a writing class at the community center, forcing the tangled mess of my emotions onto the page. I learned to sit with the loneliness, to understand it as a temporary state, not a permanent diagnosis. I rediscovered the taste of food, the pleasure of a book that had nothing to do with him, the simple joy of an uninterrupted Saturday with no waiting. I was rebuilding myself, brick by careful brick, and this time, the foundation was my own self-worth. Months later, at that same writing class, a man named Leo asked about my piece. He was patient. He listened. He didn't try to fix anything. He just acknowledged what I had shared. We started getting coffee after class. The conversations were easy, light. He was divorced, had his own stories, but he led with transparency, not mystery. Our first date was a walk on the beach in the bright afternoon sun. He held my hand and his grip was firm and honest. There was no hidden life in his eyes, no second meaning in his words. It was all right there, open and safe. It felt gentle. It felt real. I sometimes still think of Arthur, of the night we loved like monsters, all fierce and forbidden, and ultimately unsustainable. I don't hate him. I pity the version of myself that believed that was all I deserved. My life now is not a frantic poem written in the dark. It is a steady, unfolding story written in the daylight. I learned that love shouldn't be a secret you keep, but a truth you live. It shouldn't shrink your world. It should make it vast. Leo and I are taking it slow, and every step is taken on solid ground, under an open sky.